Hi, this is Harsha Venkatesh from Dwaith Funds. I'll talk today about a very interesting character, a character who I probably would have loved to meet in person if only he was alive. A guy, Napoleon Bonaparte. See, Napoleon, I don't know how many of you have read or known about Napoleon. He was one of the greatest emperors of all times, and it's a very fascinating book which is written by Andrew Roberts. It's a huge book, so obviously I cannot talk about the entirety of the book. It's close to 1,000 pages, but there are some very interesting takeaways which I wanted to highlight. See, Napoleon was born in 1769, and during those times, France had recently conquered this small island of Corsica. Napoleon was born into a minor noble family of Corsica. He, by chance, studies in a military college, and his family is impoverished, but still, since he comes from minor nobility, he gets admitted to this military college and he passes out as a military cadet. And during the very interesting times of the 1770s, 1780s, where there was this French Revolution, Napoleon becomes a general at the age of 24. So, from the age of 24 to the age of 34, in a span of 10 years, he conquers almost half of Europe by the time he is in his early 30s, and he becomes the Emperor of France in a most fascinating and if it was not all truthful, somebody would have said that it's more like a fiction, a impoverished kid becoming Emperor of France in his early 30s, and then he loses everything. There were 6 coalitions against Napoleon, and in one of the final coalitions where he fights the Battle of Leipzig, I think they call it as the Battle of the Nations. Before the First World War, this was the biggest war, Battle of Nations. In Leipzig, he loses and then he retreats. He gives up his empire and he is banished to the small island of Elba. So within a year, he somehow comes back to France and he regains to become the Emperor of France again for a period of 100 days. Finally, he gets defeated in the Battle of Waterloo against Lord Wellington. So Wellington is again famous because he wins multiple battles in India, and he says that the Indian battles, by the way, were far more difficult than fighting against Napoleon. So that's also a statement which Wellington makes in some of his references. It's very interesting because this was the time when France and Europe as general was going up in its, improved lifestyle and industrialization and so on and so forth. And in India, we are going down and down and down because we are not entering the age of industrialization. So the entire century from 1800 to 1900, India loses the bus for industrialization. And here in Europe, industrialization is just taking foot. And Napoleon is one of those guys who brings in the concept of civil liberty. So I will touch upon 5 things which Napoleon impacted. The first thing is when Napoleon came into power, he reconstitutes a lot of different laws, property laws, civil liberty, who can inherit what. A lot of these things were brought in, and these laws are what even today, for example, in all the democracies in the world, we follow modifications of this particular set of laws, which was called Code Napoleon. So the Code Napoleon is what today in the world constitutes the base of any civil society. The second one was one of the things which Napoleon did was he sold the entire Louisiana, the state of Louisiana and half of US. He had to sell half of US to the US government. It wasn't. It was a French empire or French territory during those days. By buying half of US, basically the nation of US doubled in size. So they bought at a princely sum of, I think, 4 cents per acre. So they gave him money because Napoleon was fighting the British, and he sold the territory of Louisiana to the United States government. So that's how they first doubled their territory. So that is interesting as well. And number 3, because of Napoleon, 3 different nations came together and they fought him in multiple coalitions. The Kingdom of Austria-Hungary, then the Prussians, and then the Russians. And for many times, they got defeated. And the most interesting battle is the Battle of Austerlitz. You should go and read about Battle of Austerlitz in 1807 or so. He defeats all the 3 nations in a coalition battle by being, generally 2 or 3 steps ahead of his enemies. He's basically trying to do things which usually people would sort of leave it out for a later date. He is like, what has to happen tomorrow? Let me make it happen today. So that was his key initiative taking drive. So that is number 3. Number 4, he basically is a master marketing guy. Any battle he fights, be it in Egypt, be it in Italy, be it in Austria, be it in Germany, Prussia during those days, he is able to do a wonderful PR campaign for himself back home. I think how to do marketing has to be learned from a guy like Napoleon. Another thing which is very interesting is he is a guy who takes a lot of risk. He is able to bluff his way and win battles. He is able to get the best of the treaties because he is able to take the higher risk. The way you negotiate is something which you can learn from Napoleon. And finally, I think, truth be told, he in a way unites Europe. And by defeating Napoleon for the final time in the Battle of Waterloo, Europe enters into a state of peace for majority of the next 100 years. So there was a war between Prussia and France in the 1870s, but if you take that out, there was a time of peace for a period of around 100 years. And this peace, I believe, was the key reason for Europe becoming industrialized. So I would highly recommend you to read this book about Napoleon, or at least read about Napoleon. He was a fascinating personality who became an emperor at the age of early 30s, and he dies in his 40s. So thank you very much.